To protect the climate, we're changing in ways that might surprise you. We've turned to the most experienced fluid dynamics experts in the world to make airplanes more efficient. We're planning a heat pump the size of a soccer field to reduce our own emissions, blazing a trail with recycling technology to breathe new life into old electric vehicle batteries, and to power our own factories. We're building an offshore wind farm, the biggest in the world. To protect the climate, we're changing, getting inspiration from all kinds of places and all kinds of people.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sustainable by Design event series. This is session 4 on the afternoon today. So welcome back to those that attended the previous session or to the morning session, and welcome to any newcomers that are dialing in for the first time to one of our events. My name is Ben Glavatsky. I'm the Sustainable Business Strategy Manager at BASF and your host for these events. First of all, thank you all for joining. I know time is tight, and we very much appreciate you attending our webinar here, and we hope that you find it valuable. Sustainable by Design is an event series that we are hosting during this month of April to bring sustainability awareness to the forefront. We want sustainability to be at the design phase of whatever product or service is brought to market. So in essence, let's design with the end in mind. For those of you following along, we're now going to be talking about how value chain collaborations and innovation enable plastic circularity. This is our final webinar for this week. This event series is running 2 weeks, this week and next week. So we have 4 additional sessions next week. So please make sure you tune into those. Just some very brief housekeeping items for maybe some of the new people on the call. We have on your console, you will have some speaker information on the right-hand side, so you can click on that, and there'll be some information about our speakers today. There's also a box for additional resources, so in some cases we'll have some links or any type of downloadable content, so if there's anything that we are making available, that's where it would be. There is a box on the console as well for questions, so we very much welcome and we encourage questions as well. These sessions are jam-packed with agenda and also with a lot of questions. So hopefully we get to your question. If we don't, please leave a question and we will answer it after the event series. Last, we do ask for a survey, so we do have a survey. So you'll see some icons on the very bottom. Far right is the survey, so if you can, please click on that, leave your feedback, any questions, or if there's some more information that you would like. So I think with that, we have a great agenda set up for you. We've got some great speakers, and yeah, I'd like to turn it over to Lita LaRoche to get us started. Over to you, Lita.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ben, for the introduction. As Ben mentioned, my name is Lita LaRoche, and I lead innovation and business development for BASF in Canada. And today I have the pleasure of moderating a panel discussion on the topic of plastic circularity, and more specifically, how innovation and collaboration are enabling the recycling and reuse of plastics. I have to tell you that since returning to BASF in Canada last year, I've had the opportunity to deep dive into the world of plastics and plastics recycling. For those of you who had the opportunity to attend Brian's session this morning, you would know that it is a very complex ecosystem and topic, and that requires innovative and sometimes non-traditional collaborations between organizations, governments, NGOs, and startups. So in just a moment, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel of representatives from Nova Plastics, Alberta Innovates, and BASF. But before I do that, I want to take a moment to touch on the plastics landscape in Canada and also the ResiChain program, which is what has brought these 3 organizations together, and something that we'll also have the chance to speak about a bit more today. So not unlike other parts of the world, Canada is struggling to reduce plastic waste. Less than 11% of plastic gets recycled, and the remaining of that ends up in landfills. We are seeing, globally and also locally here in Canada, that brand owners are making significant commitments to reduce virgin plastic. And the government of Canada is striving for a circular economy. So they've committed to 50% recycled content in plastic products by 2030. We're also seeing extended producer responsibility programs being launched by different provinces in Canada, which are requiring and essentially setting regulation to regulate the recycling of plastic. So to help support this challenge and to enable plastics recycling, BASF Canada launched the ResiChain program in 2020. And ResiChain brings together all of the plastic value chain players to trial technologies that enable circularity, tracking, and sorting of recycled plastics. It is essentially focused on two technology elements. So there's a physical tracer tracker that identifies and follows plastic through the value chain, and then also a blockchain technology, which creates a digital twin and provides secure transfer of ownership of the plastics. The initial concept for ResiChain was actually born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where there are legislative requirements for minimum recycled content, but quite a bit of plastics fraud. So that we then decided to test an initial proof of concept in 2020 in British Columbia, Canada. And that essentially proved circularity by tracking the life cycle of each product from pellet to pellet. And now, since 2022, the program has been more focused on the province of Alberta, where we've brought together players from every aspect of the plastics value chain. You can see on the slide there, we have everything from resin producers to brand owners, waste management organizations, as well as recyclers. And at this stage of the pilot, the group has been working on further developing and testing the blockchain infrastructure and also identifying tracer technologies which could help close the loop. So without further ado, it is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists, whose organizations are all involved in ResiChain as one of the many ways that they're enabling plastic circularity. And Mayor, I would like to start with you if I could. Mayor Niku is the Senior Manager for Clean Technology at Alberta Innovates, whose mandate is to promote innovation and in the province and support projects like ResiChain. So, and Mayor, in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to tell us more about yourself and your work at Alberta Innovates. But first, I want to acknowledge that you are based in Edmonton, Alberta, and recognizing that our audience is dialing in from around the world, and I'm sure some people are wondering why we choose to live somewhere where it's below 0 degrees Celsius for half of the year and how we survive winter in Canada. Maybe you can also share some tips for how you survived this past winter.
Thank you, Lita. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I really like the fact that you start with the winter, because I can tell you easily is like 5 to 6 months of winter in Edmonton. And the first thing is, as someone that was not born in this climate, but now is living here, basically the first thing is that you accept that you never get used to it. So it's easier for some people to handle it and it's harder for others. And it's really good if you are involved in some winter activities, but because I'm not, so basically I've adopted some indoor hobbies, and then I make sure that I stay busy and sane at the same time during the winter. And when it's nice and warm, and I'm telling you, when it's sunny and plus 10, it's called warm. So basically I get outside, and I don't know how many picnics I do in one summer. It's like renewable energy that you have to store it during the day and use it at night. Basically, I try to store as much as heat I can during the nice weather and then use it in winter. So, and do you want me now to transition to Alberta?
Yeah, if you could also just give us a brief introduction about your work at Alberta Innovates.
So Alberta Innovates, basically it's the research arm of Government of Alberta. We have 11 different locations throughout the province, and the number of employees are 589 at the time. It keeps changing, as you can imagine. And with the operating budget of $250 million, and we have two subsidiaries, Inatech Alberta and Cipher Technologies. And for us, really, our mandate, as you mentioned, is about supporting innovation, provide funding for different innovative projects and ideas. And the target is to have economic prosperity, also contribute to environmental performance. GHG is a big factor for the projects that we support, but is not the only one. We also care about water, land, and biodiversity. And because our funding comes from provincial government, it's okay that technologies and projects come from anywhere around the world, as long as there are some positive impacts. And there is a line of sight for those impacts to be realized in the province and in Canada. And at the moment, or for the fiscal year that we just wrapped up, basically, we have more than 1,300 active projects with a total portfolio value of $1.2 billion. Within Alberta Innovates, there are a few different divisions. One of them is called Clean Resources, that has 5 different teams working on that, and one of them is called Clean Technology. For clean technology, there are 4 major pillars. One of them is CCUS and hydrogen. The other one is bioenergy and circular economy, renewable and alternative energy, and critical minerals and emerging technology. The program I'm managing, it's bioenergy and circular economy, obviously the most relevant one to the conversation we have today. And the focus areas are, the first one is about renewable fuels. So if there are any projects, any ideas related to either liquid like SAF or biocrude, anything, or even gaseous side like biogas, renewable natural gas, is something that we support. Circular economy is really about plastic circular economy, or PCE, and Recichain basically is under this focus area. And also we have waste conversion, that any type of waste that is not bio-based or is not plastics. And one example I always provide, it's like emerging type of waste, like PVs at the end of life. If there are technologies to recycle them and use them, it's something that basically would fit our funding. So this is a brief about Alberta Innovates, and I think now it's like back to you, Lita.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mayor, for that introduction. Next, I would like to introduce Greg DeCunder, who is the Vice President, Polyurethane Marketing and Circular Polymers at Nova Plastics. And Greg, your career has afforded you to work in Europe, the US, and Canada. And Greg was actually telling me that he's been a supplier, a JV partner, and now a customer of BASF. We have quite a few colleagues from BASF on the line, Greg, so I'm sure they're going to be interested to hear about your experiences. So please do tell us a little bit about yourself and what Nova's focus is when it comes to plastic circularity.
Great. Yeah, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Again, my name is Greg DeCunder. I'm Vice President of Marketing for Nova Chemicals, a Calgary-based petrochemical producer. And as Lita said, in my career, I have a 30-year career. I've had the pleasure of working with BASF in many different functions across the world, and BASF has always been a good customer, also a good supplier. I've been in joint ventures with BASF, and now I can add to that list of interactions being a guest on one of BASF's webinars. So looking forward to this time with you today. So I appreciate the opportunity. Just a little bit about Nova Chemicals. Nova Chemicals aspires to be the leading sustainable polyethylene producer in North America. So our driving purpose is to reshape plastics for a better, more sustainable world. And we are doing that through collaboration, which you'll hear a lot about today, but also innovative solutions that advance the circular economy. And so we strive to make everyday life healthier and safer, and be an actor for change for a low carbon, zero plastic waste future. So I mean, those are the reasons I get up every day and are excited to come to work and collaborate with the industry and work at NOVA. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Greg. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Apala Mukherjee, who is the president of BASF Canada. Apala, for those who don't know you, could you please just introduce yourself and maybe speak about why this topic is important for BASF?
Yeah, thanks, Lita. Welcome to all of you who are dialing in for this session. We are coming from the north of the 49th parallel. So I'm president of BASF Canada for the past 2 years. I've had 5 careers already. I was an artist, I turned a biochemist, turned polymer scientist, turned into a marketer, turned into a general manager. So I'll see if my career takes on 9 lives. But when I came to Canada, I got the information from my parents who had emigrated here in the 60s and then had the bright idea to move down to the US. They said that Canada has 4 seasons. Well, I can tell you that I find in Toronto, there's only 2 seasons, winter and road construction. But after this year's mild winter, I think I'm going to declare that Toronto has really only 1 season, which is the road construction season. But why I say this is that we are all personally seeing and experiencing some sort of climate change. So the initial video that you all watched is very pertinent. BASF in Canada is about 1,200 employees strong. We have sites across Canada, and we have a passion to drive sustainability, which is articulated in our We Create Chemistry for a Sustainable Future. We have clear targets for our circular economy, and most of them are already published, such as doubling our circular economy sales by 2030, certain amount of metric tonnage by 2025. But what we know is that we cannot get there by ourselves. Circular economy requires innovative material cycles, alternative raw materials, new business models, and interestingly enough, all of them require collaboration. Figuring out these big items and how can we reduce the waste, use the resources more efficiently, and really keep the materials out of the environment and in the economy. So looking forward to the session and appreciate all of you dialing in again. So back to you, Lita.
Thanks very much, Apala. And I'd actually like to start by asking you a question because you've had the opportunity to work in a number of different markets. And I'm just wondering if you could comment on, how you see Canada leading in plastic circularity.
Yeah,
or not leading. We like to think we're leaders.
Yes, in some aspects, yes, leading, but in some aspects, I think there is, you cannot just have one lever only working, because then the gears don't work and work properly, right? So you have to have all the things kind of moving and working in sync. So the Canadian government has taken action by introducing policies that target reducing waste. What I would say that the government also needs to be motivated with the public-private partnership that is critical in bridging the gap in terms of the policymakers and those who are responsible for making and producing materials, like ourselves and Nova Chemicals. And this is why we really appreciate the, I would say, the support from Alberta Innovates, because they get it, right? That it cannot be just us doing it without the infrastructure, without the support and the policies that actually govern it. So by working together, I would say the governments and the industry leaders are able to come up with better solutions that really drive circularity, innovative solutions, and technologies. And Resicine is a great example of that. You want to have EPR? Absolutely. But EPR requires support and collaboration and innovation. And that is absolutely critical. So I would say in some aspects, the government policies help to reduce plastic waste. And Canada has a large number of industry groups that are also working towards it. What we also need is actually active support in promoting and emphasizing the circular economy and the recycled content that we so want to get to.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Apala. And Mayor, I'm just wondering if you could comment on your perspective. What advantages do you see Canada, or more specifically Alberta, offering when it comes to plastic circularity, and where do you feel like we still have some work to do?
I think in general, I like to put something in perspective. Canada is the second largest country in the world, and it has like 37 million population and a very harsh climate. So anything we want to do, any technology, and a lot of times it comes up over and over and again, we do technology development, but when we want to commercialize, there are always challenges that we have to face that might not even be known in some jurisdictions. There's always an additional layer of challenges. And I give you a couple of examples. A few years ago, we were trying to commercialize basically one of our technologies, and even the challenges we had with freezing and even staying in certain temperature for a duration of time was so energy intensive. And the other example, right now, we are collaborating within the Alberta government to do a study on how much feedstocks we can bring, like plastics waste, we can have access to in Alberta, because the goal is to have like a center of excellence and with the whole chemical recycling infrastructure to process those feedstocks. And it includes how much is generated within the province and how much we can import from neighboring provinces or even some of the states in the US. And the whole challenge with the population density and long distance and even cold transportation, sometimes transportation during winter, we are always concerned about the carbon intensity of things like that. So we know that these challenges exist, but the attitude is not because it's hard, we shouldn't do it. The attitude has been because it's hard, no, we have to also work harder to overcome some of those challenges. Is either on the policy side, regulation, and it's not just PCE. We have several examples. You already alluded to the regulations related to PCE, but I want to add to that, like clean fuel regulations, what's happening related to hydrogen at provincial and federal level, carbon tax, so many of those examples we see, and the type of investments we see in is either technology development or commercialization. We get requests from anywhere in the world because of the funding we have available here. So I'm really happy to see that we are working on that. It might take sometimes longer, but the other consideration is also because Canada is a resource-based country, and we are exporting so much of our resources and also products like manufacturing, petrochemical, all of those products. And we know that there is a global trend for more sustainability. It's a consumer demand. So to stay relevant and to be able to compete, we need also to check some of those boxes. So it adds another incentive to make sure that we are meeting our international commitments. So overall, we have to basically, all of us work together and make sure that we are working toward the right direction.
Thanks very much for those comments, Mayor. And I want to bring Greg in just to bring in the producer's perspective. Greg, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing emerging as your organization and all organizations, a lot of your customers are transitioning to plastics that are more circular?
Yeah, there's a number of challenges, as you can imagine. One of the largest challenges is, the mismatch, let's say, between the demand for recycled plastics that have been announced through commitments from brand owners and retailers through, for example, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. You can just look to that to see the demand pull or the need, and that there's a huge mismatch with that demand, future demand, and the current supply. And so, producers like Nova are seeing an opportunity here. Traditionally, we've been a producer of polyethylene and ethylene, and we are wanting to complement that production with recycled polyethylene. So we've made a North American industry leading commitment to have, by 2030, 30% of our total polyethylene sales from recycled plastics. And we're leaning very heavily into mechanical recycling because it's a technology that is available now, and we see an opportunity for, you know, applying our material science knowledge, our process knowledge, our responsible care approach to really upgrade the supply of mechanically recycled polyethylene and the quality. And so, you know, we really see that opportunity to try to meet that demand with greater supply. But one of the big challenges is getting the feedstock. And so that's where a lot of collaboration from, you know, other industry players and the government can help.
Paula, maybe you could speak a little bit about what BASF is doing in this space in terms of, you know, how we're innovating to support customers like Nova, as well as some challenges that we're experiencing ourselves in this area.
Yeah, sure. I think, I mean, the challenge is what Greg talked about, you know, the lack of infrastructure and, you know, difficulty in getting the stakeholders to collaborate with the same objectives. I mean, MRF may say don't have enough demand. At the same time, the brand owner says that there is not enough supply, and they're looking at the same numbers. It's interesting, right? There's also the inconsistency in legislation and how and reporting. That's also a major challenge when it comes to tracking and use of recycled plastics. So, you know, the challenges, they're quite a bit, right? So BASF, we see this. We are trying to be part of the discussions in various legislative bodies, as well as with our industry partners, trying to address some of them. We are also working with the bodies such as RedCert, ISCC, et cetera, to advance those topics. Independently, we are trying to figure out how do we work with the individual MRFs in trying to get supplies, et cetera. One of the things is important that it's just not one size fits all and only one option, right? So, you know, there is mechanical recycling, there is stuff that was going to be depolymerized. And when it comes to the next step, the polymer degrades enough, you have to chemically recycle. So we have a hierarchy that we want to establish and make sure that that is kind of a standard and people follow that, so that, you know, the least resource intensive materials is actually preserved. And, you know, the way that you have the circle, kind of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation model, you actually go through the various loops and kind of go that direction. That's very important, and that requires solutioning in different ways. So we look at extending the loop and closing the loop. And what I mean by closing the loop is that we want to offer solutions that help close the recycling loop and integrate recycled and renewable feedstock to help minimize the carbon footprint of the product. So this doesn't just apply to plastics, but also to other materials such as batteries for electric vehicles, where we are trying to recover key metals such as lithium and nickel. We also want to extend the loop, so increase the resource efficiency and the lifespan of materials, so the products have a longer service life and the overall environmental impact along the value chain is reduced. For that, actually, you need to, again, think about innovative material cycles, alternative pathways and circular feedstock, and also the new business models. You need to have digital solutions that offer, you know, decoupling growth with resource consumption with actually the material loops. And ResiChain is one example of that. You keep the material in the loop, it gets consumed multiple times. It's not that with the resource consumption, you actually keep on producing more and more, because then you're going to have just landfills and landfills. Alternative feedstocks, as I talked about, certified mass balance approach with the chem cycling, it's absolutely important bringing the conversion back to the basic building blocks when the other solutions don't exist. But again, that has to be economically and environmentally viable. So the innovative material cycles, designing with the end in mind, is absolutely important. And some of the products that we are kind of positioning in the marketplace is our ErgoCycle that helps with the mechanical recycling of product plastics, as well as our mattress recycling, as well as our single material athletic shoe. So all those things actually helps with the circularity. It's just that we have had headlines with the plastic packaging quite a bit, but durables are also facing similar challenges. And we have to keep that in mind, that it's not just one area. You have to actually have, essentially innovation looking across all materials.
Yeah, and Paula, maybe if we could just build on that for a second, because I think the conversation tends to focus quite a bit on consumer packaging. I also wanted to ask you, how you see recycling evolve when it comes to harder to recycle materials or industrial plastics. Not necessarily harder to recycle, but plastics with more industrial applications.
Yeah, and some of them are harder. Yeah, so let's face the brutal truth. I mean, look, the consumer packaging stream has been the visible pollutant in our oceans and waterways. So it's right that we focus on that and get that sorted out to the best of our abilities. But again, with that, there are, I would say, challenges that we already see in the infrastructure. And lack of infrastructure for collection and bringing those materials back is a big piece. However, beyond that, beyond the single-use plastics, which has been, kind of touted as the big pollutant and essentially the bad for the environment, and we should get rid of that. There are other materials, durables also, which essentially, if you don't keep it in check, it might end up being a bigger problem in the future. So one of the things that we want to do is to make sure that certain things whatever can be recycled, are recycled, renewable content is inserted. So as I talked about, the mattress recycling project, chem cycling project, single material shoes, all of these are absolutely important because those provide alternatives to the way we look at resources and consume the resources. And with that design in mind, you actually can figure out what is the best use of the material with the lowest carbon footprint.
And Greg, I want to ask you a little bit about designing for recyclability and also just, what NOVA's view is and how you're approaching some of these harder to recycle plastics. I know NOVA's primarily focused on consumer packaging, but, when it comes to film or, products for food application, how do you see us addressing this challenge?
Yeah, thank you. So the challenge of, first of all, I think a lot of packaging can be recycled. And so, we have to do that. We have to accomplish that. And mechanical recycling today is the lowest carbon footprint. And we believe, we can really improve quality to a point where it can be used in a much wider range of applications. We already have, for example, in North America, recycled polyethylene that can be used in food contact applications. And we have those available today, and we're going to be growing that. There are, of course, types of packaging, whether it be multi-material packaging or durables that are not as easily collected and recycled in a mechanical recycling stream. So one of the ways we're tackling that is actually a partnership with a company called Interchem, a Canadian company, who is located in Alberta and collaborating as well with Alberta Innovates. And so what we have there is we're exploring a new advanced recycling technology, which is based on a gasification route to advanced recycling. And so Interchem already operates a large gasifying unit up in Edmonton, and they are able to take all the municipal solid waste from the city. So not just plastics recyclables, the recyclables that can be mechanically recycled are diverted and mechanically recycled, but everything else that cannot be easily mechanically recycled, whether it be plastics or organics, goes through their gasifier. And what NOVA is working on is a joint development with Interchem and to put a new process behind that gasification unit to be able to take the synthetic gas and convert it into feedstocks that can be used in a steam cracker and through a catalytic process, low carbon process. And so that way, the diet or the amount of products that feedstock availability would greatly expand to many of those hard to recycle plastics, multi-material plastics, and even, like I said, organics. So it's a pretty exciting technology. Alberta Innovates has helped fund, and we're building a pilot plant right now, is under construction to further develop that technology.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And we've now talked about two projects that Alberta Innovates is supporting, Mayor. I'm interested to just get your perspective on, best practices for government and industry collaboration, and how, maybe some more examples you could share of how government and industry are working together in this space, and what you think is working well, or maybe what could be improved when it comes to private-public partnerships.
Yes. Go ahead.
So you cannot believe how happy I am when I hear about this, projects. And sometimes I really want to be on the other side, actually doing the projects, but still even being on the government, like the funding side, and somehow being engaged in so many different initiatives is very exciting too. So, the examples are numerous. Basically, I can give you so many of them. But maybe overall, what we really need to see, because we cannot do anything in silo, and I can speak for Alberta Innovates, we support projects because they are innovative and because they are new, and we know that there are impacts. But at the same time, we want to see that there is a demand for this, at some point, because when we support, it's usually TRL 3 to 7. So basically bench scale pilot. And we want to see the commercialization of these technologies in the future. And a lot of times we are even asking for an end user, for an industry to support these technologies during the scale up, because that's how you can know that there is a demand for the technology, for the product at some point, and you're going to have some impacts. So there is a lot of conversation happening between government and industry. And this is a good example, ResiChain. If anyone can pull off a project like ResiChain, is BASF. Or the example that Greg had for Enerchem and Nova. So we need BASF, we need Nova Chemicals, we need major industries to allocate their resources to take leadership and start these initiatives, move them forward. At the same time, give government the signal that there is a demand. If I go back to our senior management and ask for more funding for this focus area, I need to show them some proof. And this is the proof that there is a demand and things are happening and they are exciting. So basically, that's how we can make sure that more funding is going to come for these projects.
Great. Thank you very much, Mayor. And you talked a bit about ResiChain as an example. I want to mention to the audience watching and just remind everyone to use the Q&A. We've seen a few questions start to trickle in, and I'm going to turn it over to audience questions in just a second. Maybe before we do, just to bring it back to ResiChain, Greg, if you could comment on what you see the opportunity being with ResiChain and what Nova's getting out of your involvement with the consortium.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great opportunity. We're proud to be part of the consortium, and I think there's two main drivers for our interest in learning more about what this kind of technology can do. And the first one goes back to the great challenge that I brought up earlier in our panel, which is feedstock availability. And what this project can do, as you scale, is help to make sure that consumers want recycling to be easy. That's been proven over and over, at least in North America, and consumers, unlike other parts of the world here, are not necessarily willing to separate their recyclables into different types. So it's the industry will have to adapt to that consumer behavior and make it easy in order to capture as much plastic back for recycling. And so a project like ResiChain or technology can take that single stream recycling that comes from a household or in industries and then be able to separate it more easily and more accurately to create clean feedstock streams or pure feedstock streams for the different kinds of recycling technologies, whether it be mechanical recycling or pyrolysis or gasification or solvation, any of the different technologies or new technologies. So that to me is one of the big benefits of this kind of technology is to be able to take the wide stream of plastics, which we hope to get back from consumers over time, and then being able to sort it to the highest and best use for getting it back into, returning it back into the system, into the circularity. And then of course, the other areas, what's been touched on, is validation or verification of recycled content. Really making sure that we can prove that what we're putting out there as recycled content into the market can be validated and verified, and so that we're not accused of or not guilty of greenwashing or not being consistent with our mass balancing.
Yeah, and I think, we don't have any of the brand owners from the consortium represented on this call, but I could confidently say, having had lots of conversations with London Drugs and Save on Foods, who are part of the conversation, that's a key priority for them and why they've, continued to be so engaged in the consortium. So thanks for those comments, Greg. Paula, I'm going to throw the audience in a second, but before I do, anything from your perspective you'd like to add in terms of where you see the value of the collaboration that's happening through the ResiChain program?
Yeah, I think this is, thanks, Lita. I think this is one of those examples where, with the ResiChain, you see the complexity of what it takes for an entire village to actually recycle plastics. So it's not an easy one. Otherwise, it would have already been done several times over. The question is it a problem with the trash collection or the recycled plastics collection? Is it contaminated? Why is the technology converters not there? What is happening in the reverse logistics? So I think that's where I would say the interesting parts is to figure out the reverse logistics. We have been doing the linear part quite well till it hits the consumers. Bringing it back is where we start scratching our heads and trying to figure out. So do we need more MRFs, or do we need a better sorting system and a better collection system? Do we need better education of the consumers? So all those things are part of this whole, I would say, learning process. We can have the best technology, but if you also have to marry it with behavioral changes and infrastructure changes, otherwise technology is not going to be able to satisfy and meet the real demand, and it's going to be set up for failure. So I would say having the consortium members with the different perspectives, different inputs is absolutely valuable to make sure that this kind of project, which is fundamentally difficult to do, actually works. So thank you, Greg, and thank you, Mayor, for being a great supporter and being a partner for BASF in this very important project. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Paula. And you spoke to the complexity, and I always go back to, we're going from a linear to a circular model. As a consortium, we often joke that even the circular model is way too pretty. It really doesn't capture the complexity of what's actually happening when it comes to movement of plastics through the value chain. So the complexity is real, and I think having everyone in the same room talking about their challenges, priorities, and potential solutions is the way we're going to be able to get some solutions sooner than later. So thanks again. I'm going to turn it over to some audience questions now. Someone's asked a question just around what is being done to increase plastic recycling facilities around the world. So, recognizing, as Greg said, that most plastic can be recycled, but in reality, most of it ends up in a landfill. I don't know, Mayor, if you could maybe speak to some of the things that you're seeing happen in the province of Alberta in terms of, what's being done to improve the plastic recycling facilities themselves. And, Greg and Apollo would also ask you to comment.
The part I can speak to is the innovation part. So basically what we are doing into bringing different technologies, because especially in Canada, there is so much land available. It's always the cheapest way is to send everything to landfill, but we know that is not the best way. But at the same time, cost considerations always something that is a challenge. So if we can actually come up with the right technologies and improve them in a way that at some point, and with the right regulations in place, they can compete somehow, at least get close, then maybe we see more recycling happening. So that's the part, at least for us, we try to contribute. I cannot really speak to other part of the government or what they're doing related to major investments, but that we know it's happening. Like City of Edmonton recently improved what they were doing in their MRFs. So, but for us, it's really about technology. It's about innovation, how to make sure some of these technologies become commercial, bring the cost down, and we see more of it in real life and operational.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to keep going through the questions because they're coming in fast and furious. So Greg, Paula, if you have anything to add on that one, jump in now. Otherwise, the next question I'd like to throw maybe to Paula. Oh, go ahead, Paula. Sure.
Lita, maybe just, look, we have, there's lots and lots of MRFs already. The question is, are they being efficiently used? Of course, we need more MRFs. There's going to be more infrastructure needs, et cetera. And that has been also identified with a lot of us are part of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. And there's a cities program in the US currently running. It might be coming to Canada as well soon. We don't know where the target's going to be, but there is a recognition that the reverse logistics, including the MRFs and the technology, and taking those bales of plastic and then converting them to material that can be used in the production is important. So there is no question that there is going to be more work to be done, but there is a recognition that this is lacking. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. We see there's you have a disconnect in the system between like I was mentioning earlier, the demand and the commitments made by retailers and brand owners for their need for recycled plastics, and then on the other side, the supply, and the disconnect is. We probably need more, not necessarily MRFs right away, but clear demand signals and capabilities to extract plastics from, and commitments to take the plastics away from the MRF so that the MRFs will then collect more plastics. So, a building of plastic recycling and sorting facilities adjacent to MRFs are needed. And that's an area where I think industry, can step in and help.
Yeah, really good comment, Gray. And you're talking about, supply. Someone's actually asking, can plastic be converted to fuel? So I guess in the event that, we're not mechanically recycling plastic, Paula or Greg, do you want to comment on the question, can plastic be converted to fuel?
Sure. I mean, the answer is yes, and it is done already in many parts of the world, taking plastic waste and mixing it in with other fuels to produce energy or fuels. That's obviously not circular. It is solving, let's say, a plastic waste issue, because you're not allowing the waste to go back to a landfill or even worse, to the environment. You're converting it into fuels, and that is being done. But the ideal situation is still returning that plastic back into circularity, back into it to be used in a plastic article again. And but I think in the long term, even with the new technologies for chemical recycling or advanced recycling, there will be a certain amount of yield which cannot be returned into circulation for plastics. That a good alternative is to put it in the fuel stream. A good secondary.
Ditto with Greg, yeah? So he answered it perfectly. Nothing to add.
Perfect. I have another one for you, Greg. There's just been a question around how expectations of your customers have changed and how your expectations of your suppliers has changed as we've transitioned towards a circular economy for plastics.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say even 3 years ago, anytime I was talking to one of our customers in a meeting with a customer, or even occasionally going downstream, speaking with brands, the discussion was really about new high-performing polyethylene materials or other, advanced materials, and how to make packaging use less material. And that's still absolutely important. Reducing usage is still the number one in the seriatim of sustainability. But today, every single conversation, at least half of the meeting, is about designing for recyclability or incorporating recycled content. I mean, it has just been a dramatic shift over the last 2 to 3 years in, the level and engagement and discussion, and how are we going to do this? And so that's where the supplier comes in, is how can our suppliers and the whole value chain, it's not upon the supplier alone. We have to share the opportunity and the cost of transitioning to a circular economy. So, what we ask of our suppliers is, their innovation, their ideas, their transparency, so that we can understand the best path forward together. And again, like I said, share that opportunity and burden, and not put it on one step of the value chain.
Thanks for those comments, Greg. I think that answered the question well. The next question, I'm not sure I know the answer to, and I don't want to put my panelists on the spot, but maybe one of you will surprise me and know the answer to this. And it's around what the level of recycling is in Canada. So I know that only 11% of plastic gets recycled in Canada, but the question was around municipal solid waste, textiles, cardboard, food, household waste. So not exclusive to plastic. So 11% of plastic gets recycled in Canada. Does anyone know what the level of recycling is for other household goods that can be recycled? You've stumped us, so we'll have to come back to you on that one. Another one has just come in the chat asking a question around what % of plastic will never be able to be recycled. And I think there's more been a question around, the gasification process, which both Greg referred to, and chem cycling that Apollo referred to. Just if you could comment on, how environmentally friendly that process is. Maybe, Apollo, do you want to take that one to start?
I was having a hard time unmuting myself. So yes, look, I think the question really is that when does it become impossible to recycle? Is at the very inception, or after the plastic degrades after a while, right? So if it's cannot be recycled from the get-go, then we need to look at the design of the material, right? So it starts with a different question. Then if you recycle, say mechanically recycle it 5 times, etc., and then it cannot be done, anything can be done, you go through the solvolysis or depolymerization, and then you go into the chem cycling. So there is a established hierarchy, because the efficiency parts are very different, for each one of those loops and those technologies. So we have to be very mindful that chemistry is a science, and we need to, we can be creative as much as we want to, but there is a science to it. There is going to be a conversion factor. One of the issues with when you actually take plastics and just immediately convert it, you have, I would say contaminants that are harder, makes the inefficiency even harder, to making it harder to recycle and put it into the current asset structure, which are designed for virgin material. Let's be honest, our assets are designed with the linear piece, and we are now trying to put in recycled content. So it's fundamentally different. And we have to acknowledge that some of them needs to be retrofitted, but it's not an easy question to answer, because fundamentally most materials should be able to be recycled in certain formats. And the efficiency is going to vary very much. I have yet to come across something that cannot be at all recycled, because it can be upcycled, or it can be downcycled. So, I don't know, Greg, if you have anything to add to that, but that's how our viewpoint is, at least.
Yeah, well, very well answered. Thank you.
Greg, another one's come in that I might direct towards you. You talked about the conversations that you're having with your customers. There was a question in the chat just around packaging standardization and how, that might make recycling simpler. what appetite are you seeing from your customers to have, more standardization in terms of plastic type or color? And, what do you see as being some of the maybe limitations in moving to a standardized color or plastic type, if any at all?
Yeah, that's probably a good question. Even better question to be answered by one of the brand owners that's really in touch with the consumer. But I can offer what we hear from our customers, which are one step away from that. And I wouldn't say I'm hearing a lot of talk about standardization on colors or formats. It's more on material. There's a very strong drive to convert as much packaging, and this is flexible packaging generally, to monomaterials instead of using multiple types of material. A package that might have polyethylene and nylon and EVOH or aluminum foil. Some of that is absolutely necessary. You just can't achieve the performance of the package without it. And it has a very important purpose because it extends the life of the food, which is even the most important sustainability benefit. And we shouldn't throw that away. But a lot of those packages can be simplified into all polyethylene structures. And therefore, they are easier or more able to be recycled. They are recyclable. I don't think I'm hearing a lot about, standardizing formats into one color. Everything is brown and just states sugar or salt or whatever on the package yet. We're not there yet. Consumers still like to have choices.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing those insights, Greg. And I'm maybe just going to have one more question. I know there's a few that have come in we're not going to be able to get to. The last question I'll leave with you, Mayor. The question is, what makes Canada or Alberta a good place for innovation projects? I think you spoke about that a little bit. And what motivated Alberta Innovates to support the ResiChain project?
I think one of the reasons people come to Alberta, the first thing is because of the major industries that we have here. It's energy industry, one of the largest producer of petrochemical products. All of that is the first thing. And the other part is the type of investments that we have for innovative projects. And we are really open to collaboration. And one of the things that we saw in ResiChain, because again, the ResiChain basically came from a different province, but because of the connections that it created with Alberta stakeholders, that was one of the considerations. The first thing for us is about innovation. That's the deal breaker. So if something is commercial, there is no technical risk in the project, there is no point for us to get involved in. And also we are looking at the feasibility, what I mentioned about, BSF actually taking the charge of doing this project, how much money is involved, who's doing the project. And, the last thing is about the size of impacts. And the quantification of those kind of impacts. And as a result, and again, I want to emphasize that we do not expect any of those impacts at the end of a research project, but as a commercialization of these technologies. And something that has been very unique with the ResiChain that I have experienced, because now it's more than a year that I've been working with the project team. The first of this project, the nature is collaborative. So it's about a consortium, different members coming together. And on top of that, this team has been really inclusive, really open to engage so many of different players in and hear different voices. This way, basically, first, there is more learning, there is more sharing of the learnings, and there is going to be higher size of impacts because so many different players benefit. And we talked about collaboration between industry and government. And I want to acknowledge also the role of other players that are also involved in this project. Small, medium-sized enterprises, different associations, technology providers, academia, startups, all of them basically are part of the conversation. That's something that we are really looking for when we are looking at the project. And ResiChain is a very good example of that.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Look, I want to thank the audience first and foremost for some of the great questions that have come in, and I regret that we don't have time to get to all of them during the session. I want to thank the panelists, so Mayor, Greg, Apala, thanks for the time to share your insights today. And as we're at the top of the hour, I'm now going to turn it back to you, Ben, to close things out. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Lita. And I also would like to thank our panelists for participating today and for the preparations to be able to be here today. So thank you. We very much appreciate it. I found it very interesting, the concept of economic prosperity and environmental performance. That balance, I think, is very critical in creating these thriving circular economies. I think both of those concepts need to be in harmony for circularity to really exist. And adding mechanical and advanced recycling there, I mean, that's all part of that ecosystem that then is generated. And, just like in our title, Sustainable by Design, designing the next generation of products, of materials to be more circular, I think that is critical. And that is the purpose of our series here, is to get those thoughts flowing. So now I'd like to thank our audience for participating. It's been this has been our first full week, so we will be coming back next week. I would also ask you to please leave your feedback in the survey. So that's that bottom icon on the far right-hand side. We very much would like to hear from you. And yeah, hope to see you next week. But this concludes our first week, and hope everyone has a good rest of the day, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.